how long have you been at Yorkshire Housing? And for those who don't know you, can you give us a little brief overview of yourself and Yorkshire Housing?
Okay, right. And firstly, thanks for having me along today. So I think I've been at Yorkshire Housing. I started on the 1st of April last year, 2019. So I've had all the jokes about April Fools and all that sort of thing. So there's nothing you can say that I haven't already heard. Prior to that, I was over at the Pennines at Holton. But I'm Donny born and bred. And my dad would probably, he struggled to forgive me for going over the Pennines when I went to Manchester. So he's finally, although sadly he's passed away, but he's finally happy that I'm back in good old Yorkshire. So I've been at Yorkshire for what now? So that's about 15, 16 months. And as I say, Yorkshire Housing is pretty much what it says on the tin. It provides a range of housing options across the whole of Yorkshire. And Yorkshire's massive. Most people don't realise how huge Yorkshire is. It's 100 miles north to south and 100 miles east to west. And it's got everything. It's got, your bustling cities. It's got, your Leeds, your Sheffields. It's got the heritage of places like York and Thirsk and Ripon. It's got, your whole multicultural centres. It's got rural housing. It's just got everything basically in one place. And that's basically what Yorkshire Housing do. And we also build a lot of new homes, as well as have about just short of 20,000 existing homes. And included within that a whole range of housing products. So low cost home ownership, predominantly shared ownership, but also some help to buy, some outright sale. But the majority of what we do is, in terms of new build, is social and affordable rent. So bit of everything really. And we were formed from an amalgamation of several different smaller organisations as well.
Okay. How many homes have you got under management or ownership?
It's around about 19,000. So just but with the development pipeline that we've got and the completions that we've got, that will tip over to 20,000 in the next sort of year, 18 months or so. So yeah, it's a growing organisation. We do dispose of some properties, so we do stock swaps or disposals to other associations who are better placed to manage some of the properties that we have. So yeah, it's got a vibrancy and an energy about it, which is good, as well as a good heavy dose of Yorkshire pragmatism. And having been away from Yorkshire for a while, I have been reintroduced to certain phrases like, no matter what the problem is, the first response is, it'll be reet, we'll sort it, it'll be reet. And the other one is chuffing out, which is a phrase I've not heard in years, and took me back to my childhood, and even now I smile thinking of that one.
Brilliant. So obviously you've kind of given us a broad brush of Yorkshire Housing. I'm interested in, what was your sort of entree into the sector? How did you sort of start? And
I think any CEO will tell you, if they're honest, there's a great degree of luck in it. Sometimes opportunities come up and you're able to take them. I think also just making it happen yourself. So to sort of, not wait for opportunities to come up, but actually go out there and try and sort of raise a bit of profile. And certainly when I was developing my career, it was never a deliberate tactic to have a brand or whatever or presence. But actually, when there were opportunities in the organisation, it was about suggesting new stuff and being part of things where you were piloting new ideas, or if in those very sort of dry core briefs and corporate briefings, but if there was a little nugget in there, just to follow up and go, what, saw that, be interested. Is there any way I can sort of, give it a go? I think today, budding CEOs have got a huge sort of platform, the whole social media opportunity. Twitter, yes, but I think LinkedIn in particular is just a phenomenally powerful tool that in housing terms is very underutilized. But people have this unique opportunity to develop their own brand and personality, as well as that of the organisation and the business that they represent. So I think I would say to people, don't sit back, don't wait for things to happen. Nobody's going to come and offer you a job. You need to get up there and make it happen. But goodness me, there are so many opportunities now to be able to do that and develop that brand and that persona and get recognised and known. Why wouldn't you want to take that?
Yeah, absolutely. What's been the biggest change you've seen in the organisation, A, since you joined, and B, in the sector?
Right. Okay. Oh, since I mean, I'm so lucky. Yorkshire Housing is just such a great canvas on which to sort of come into. So, you know, it was an organisation that had been well run. It was in a financially sound position, and I think what I sort of the attraction for me is really, I think my skill set is more around taking things which are good and making them fab. You know, almost squeezing that last sort of 15-20% out of things, and that's been very much the case with Yorkshire Housing. I think certainly to be able to have that starting point and really sort of drive forward. So, you know, we've driven out agile working, and we might touch on that if you want to go down what's happened since COVID. But certainly the agile working. We are one of the early sites for rolling out Microsoft Dynamics, which again is a really, really interesting process in terms of that whole solution. But also, I think we've just got more clarity. We've just become a lot clearer on things. So I'm a big fan of infographics, huge fan of infographics. So our business strategy is predominantly an infographic, and that way I think people get it. It's really clear, it's really simple, but actually I think one of the problems that the housing sector sometimes faces is that we overcomplicate what is quite a simple business model, which is that we build homes, we rent them, we let them, we collect the rent, and we repair them, and you know, people will say that's oversimplified, and it probably is, but I think sometimes we do overcomplicate things. In terms of the sector, where the sector's moved to, I think there's probably more collaboration than there used to be. You know, certainly Yorkshire Housing are a member of Homes for the North, as well as obviously the usual sort of trade and professional bodies like the Fed and the CIH, but also things like the Northern Housing Consortium. But I think there's more. There's a more shared desire and willingness to collaborate on projects or certain topics, and I think where that sits within the sort of increased levels of devolution means that if you don't do that, the housing voice is not going to be heard. So I think that's the shift I've seen certainly within the sector. You know, it was probably the case even 5-6 years ago that people would continue to plough their own furrow and that whole thing of splendid isolation. Whereas I think there's probably less of that now. I think there's a lot more willingness to collaborate.
How has COVID affected Yorkshire Housing? And I guess what plans have you made to put in place to support home workers?
Yeah, and I think this links back to the conversation we had earlier, which is around one of the things that's changed is that I'd already started to roll out agile working for our colleagues. So by pure chance, that was a program that had been ongoing for 6 months, but by pure chance, the week before lockdown was initiated, we'd pretty much were just finalising the final phase of the rollout of devices to colleagues. So we were in a really positive position, and I literally remember leaving the office on Friday the 20th of March and turning to a couple of people who I was in my last meeting of that day, and saying, "Well, I'll see you all again in July." And they all looked at me like I was stupid, and you know, it was like, well, you know, we're not going to be around for. Little did I know that wouldn't be the case. And I think if you take the whole sort of lockdown and pandemic thing, yeah, for me, you can go one or two ways on it. You can either do the glass half empty or the glass half full view of it. And my view of it is, you've got to look at this and go, right, there are some opportunities out of what has been a dreadful set of circumstances for so many people. I'm not trying in any way to belittle that. But what it has done for us as a business is that it's like we've gone in a TARDIS and we've gone forward to 2023. So as part of our agile working project, we had a plan that was the next phase, which would then move people to enable them to be completely and utterly, truly agile and work anywhere and negate the need for an office in the traditional sense. And we thought that would be 2023. In the first 5 weeks of lockdown, we got to that point. So psychologically, our teams and our people, the overwhelming message that we got back from them was, yeah, we don't want to be working at home 5 days a week because, you know, for many people, it's a difficult environment. But actually, people said, I don't want to go back to working in an office. And now really see the value of you know, being able to be flexible in terms of what that offers for me as an employee, but also how I can improve the service offer for customers. But also, you know, many people have now got used to saving a shed load of money not commuting, whether that's driving and parking or public transport, or as I call it, transpennine excuses. You know, there's no need for any of that. But also it's the time. And many people have said, like me, you know, I for over the last 4 months have had tea most nights with my family. And that hasn't been the case for many, many years. And I'm smiling now because, you know, that's a real positive for me. That's a real value add to my life. I'm not sure my kids think that. My kids are 16 and 18, so I think they just think, God, can't we send him back? You know, we've had enough of him lingering around. But I think that whole sort of change in lifestyle and change in expectations, and I think as we go forward, I do think that how we recruit, but also people lose sight of retaining really good people. And I think the employee offer, and particularly the flexibility that employers are able to offer, will be as important, and possibly in some cases more important, than paying the highest salary. And so I think as a recruitment offer, but also as a retention strategy, I think having a completely agile workforce is the way forward. And from a customer point of view, yeah, it's just a world apart from where we were even in March, where, you know, we still had quite a traditional sort of 8:30 to 5 type service, whereas now we've got that enhanced amount of flexibility as people are able to flex their home life with also being able to provide a much better service offer. So I think the whole and that's now got us to the point where we're saying, well, why is it that we need the premises that we had in Leeds City Centre, so 4 floors in Leeds City Centre that we own? Why do we need that going forward? Because actually 2 floors of that now, I can tell you, are completely mothballed. We'll never go back to that way of working. And in fact, the top floor is just full of desks and chairs. So if anybody out there wants to do a deal on some desks and chairs, I'm all ears. We'll do you a nice little deal, and we'll even blow the dust off them for you. But I think so I think the way that people work has changed. And so what I mean about talking about not having a traditional office environment, you know, my thing is about having space where people come together to collaborate and to create ideas and to actually gain energy, and almost like a boost, if you want, of energy. A bit like when I pop a Barocca, you know, it does exactly the same for me. But I think that, and I would say, you know, in a traditional work sense, I never had a good idea sat in a glass box around the table with 8 other people. You know, it's about how do you create an environment that fits the business. And, you know, we want to be one of the most dynamic, forward-thinking, innovative housing associations in the country. And I would say to do that and to deliver against that, that will never happen if we chain people to a desk for 8 hours a day to tap away at a keyboard just so that we can see them, and it makes us feel good that we can see them. Indeed, one of the other benefits coming out of lockdown is that we have never been more productive as a business than we are now. So this whole thing that people have around, oh, well, everybody's just sat at home watching Cash in the Attic or whatever else, it's just complete nonsense. In fact, the biggest challenge we've got from a people perspective at the moment is stopping people from working. So we've got too many people who are working too hard for too long. And actually what we're trying to do is to ensure that we have some systems in place to try and help people break that cycle.
It seems like the pandemic has actually been a catalyst for immense fast change from your perspective. And from what you've said, then if you've rolled the clock forward in terms of what technology to 2023, that means you've done it. There's no reason why anybody else can't do the same.
No, and just to set the benchmark of where we came from, we had thin client server desk-based systems. So we had iGels with, sort of keyboards that were full of everybody's skin and crumbs and whatever else, and mice that were sort of God knows what they had on them. And crappy screens that sort of were, I think they were previously black and white TVs or something. So we moved from that to agile working, and it doesn't cost much. And that's the other thing, we have given people really good devices. So our view is that if we're asking people to work agile, you need to give them really good kit. So yeah, they've got iPhones, yeah, they've got Surface Pros, it's about giving people the right kit to do the job, rather than just, oh, we could save 100 quid per laptop by giving them this crappy thing that will only last sort of 18 months and actually will start to slow down dreadfully 12 months in. So I think it's about making the right investment, but also recognizing all the hidden costs that are in a traditional working sense. And so we priced up each of our desk spaces. So each of our desk spaces, we're around about 3,200 quid a desk space, and we had 500 and something of them. And actually, when we did the review of how often those spaces were used, this is even well before lockdown, even before we rolled out agile working, it was only about 39% of the working week. So you have all that cost, but you have a utilization rate of less than 50%. It's like, well, why would you do that? And so actually what you then sort of transpose to is, well, actually, if you can kit somebody out with the right kit for, I don't know, maybe say 1,800 quid or whatever, and you can remove that desk space cost, actually you're still making a net saving as a business. So where's all that set? And interestingly, in terms of our running costs, we've only got one office, and just to run it, so no rent or anything because we own it, but just to run that office each month, by not having it open, we're saving about 30k a month. So you sort of think, well, actually, I'd rather use that money to hire space in places that are more local to people, reducing your carbon footprint, but actually spaces that are more innovative and more creative and more dynamic and generate better ideas and make you feel a bit more sort of positive and upbeat. Because I'm big on workspace psychology and the whole sort of thing about how people's surroundings impact upon how they are. And I've just seen a huge shift in how our people are. And so we do a snap survey every month or so with our colleagues, and our last snap survey actually said that the overwhelming message was people felt better connected to Yorkshire Housing as a family and as an organisation than they ever had done before. And initially you think, how can that be when everybody's at home? That's bizarre. But actually what it was that we have invested and we have thought and we have planned how we communicate in a much more rigorous way than we ever would do in a traditional setting. And so much so that we now refer to this as two timelines. So we have BC, but it's not relation to Jesus, it's relation to COVID. So we have life BC, before COVID, and we have AD, which is our head office is called Dyson's Chambers, so it's after Dyson's. So it's about the back and the forward look, but in a time using the timeline terminology that most people recognise. And And it is about sort of that whole approach to sort of saying, well, we're now in 2023, we're not in 2020. All the things that we planned to do, we've not had to do, which is great because that's saved us a whole raft of investment in working space and kit. But actually now, how do we continue that momentum and move forward to where we wanted to be in 2025 and beyond?
But you understand housing, but you also understand the dynamics that technology plays that folds into all of that. How can technology providers provide a better service to you so that you can do your job better? What are the challenges that you feel that are coming up in the short term or leading into the long term?
I think the big, if you going back to link to what we've just talked about, if you strip back the housing service and the landlord service, it's the wrong way round. It's a service that's based on failure. So we wait for things to happen and then we respond to them in a really uncoordinated, expensive, and from a customer's point of view, inconvenient way. And actually, I think for me, the big thing that's in our business strategy is about changing that service model, completely turning it around from being reactive to being preemptive. And I don't just mean for repairs. I mean about, predicting when people are going to fall into arrears and also when people might be a greater likelihood of terminating their tenancy with us. So it's a bit like as an employer, I shouldn't be saying this. I've gone too far now. But I know when some of my staff are active on LinkedIn, that's a bit of a warning sign that they may be looking for another job. So I will ask the question to their managers, is everything okay with X? Because I've noticed they're active on LinkedIn. Likewise, there are signals that indicate that our customers might be looking to terminate their tenancy. And why is that important? Well, for every tenancy that we turn around at Yorkshire, it costs us on average about 2,100 quid. And if by the time somebody's handed their notice in, their 4 weeks notice, to then go around to them and say, is there anything we can do to just, you're too late because they've already found where they're moving on to, and in their heads they've already moved on. In the same way that if somebody comes to you and says, I'm leaving Yorkshire Housing, it's too late because in their heads they've moved. And yeah, you might be able to bribe them for a few months with a few extra quid, but ultimately, they're not 100% with you anymore. So sorry. So where I'm going with this. So I think to get to that shift, you need probably three key ingredients. You need really good, timely, and accurate data that then has some very clever data analytics that sits on top of it and draws some conclusions and suggestions and suggested actions. Sorry. Second element is IoT kit. This stuff's cheap as chips, and I just don't get why we still fit out. One of my big frustrations is why we still fit out homes in this country like it's the 1950s. We've not done a great deal, have we, to move things on? I mean, the most obvious one and the most bonkers thing we have are keys. So if you live in one of our apartments, the bit that I don't get with this, if you live in one of our apartments, we have, these communal doors. So you have a little fob for your communal door, and you come in and use your little fob, you get to the door, and then you've got some clunky old key. And it's like, but people then are sort of fumbling around in the same bag where to open their phone, they're either using retina or biometrics of some description. And it's like, why are we doing that? Why is that still the way that we fit stuff up? And you just transpose that through, in terms of, in terms of how when we don't do any monitoring of homes, and we just wait for the customer to say, oh, something's not working, or something's leaking, or something's, making a funny noise, or something's sort of not performing as it should. And actually, all that could be talking to us, and we could have all that. So I suppose that second thing is about, that whole sort of smart home sort of analogy. And then the third element, which overlays that, is real-time sort of customer insight. So all the stuff that, Amazon, for example, we talked about Amazon, but Amazon do, when I've ordered my usual daily delivery that's coming to the door, much to Mrs. Atkin's irritation, they're also going, oh, and you might also like these. Well, there's a reason why you do like them, because they've used clever data analytics, but also know what you as an individual customer want. And I think using some of that so that we can start to personalize some of what we do as well. And I think when you put those three ingredients together, then you're able to start to reverse the sort of customer offer from being reactive to being preemptive. And I think, you might think, well, why bother? Well, from a customer point of view, it's a great customer experience. It's much better, isn't it, to ring somebody up or to contact them directly through the app and message them and to say, nothing to worry about. Your boiler is indicating there's a little bit of a problem. It'll be fine for 2 to 3 months, but we need to come along and fix it so that you're not left without heating and hot water. We appoint on the app with them. Engineer turns up, sorts it. But isn't that a better experience than Friday night, the boiler failing? Because it's always Friday night. Boilers never fail in working hours. They always wait till it's out of hours. And then, somebody who's left at home, maybe with young children, without heating and hot water, and waiting for an engineer to turn up, trying to get through to a call centre. It's just a crap sort of process, isn't it? It's just, why would you want that? And I suppose, so what I want to do is to get to that. And I suppose my big frustration about this year is that we've not been able to do that because we've been involved in first of all, getting some other bits and bobs. So we had the Dynamics rollout, which we're still ongoing with. We had the Agile working rollout, but then we've also had this once in a 100-year pandemic thing, which seems to have got in the way a little bit as well. And between those three, it means we've not been able to progress some of those things as much as we want. But we did have a conversation yesterday, funnily enough, about how we gear that up and get that ready to go in 2021. And I think it's those sorts of things that are transformational. And I think those are sorts of things that, in answer to your question, where suppliers can help, because their pain points, data analysts, I tell my kids, become data analysts, you're going to make a shed load of money, and it's just like going to be an exponential market for your skills. Neither of them will listen, but there you go. But I think that whole thing around, being able to help us sort of understand what the data is telling us, because as well, housing providers have got data to die for, but it's just that either it's not accurate, it's not timely, or we just don't know how we could be using it. And I think that, coupled with the being able to find low-cost solutions that we're able to put in homes, both in terms of new and retrofit, that enable us to manage those in a sort of 21st century way. I think that's where suppliers can really help. And I think there's an increasing amount of appetite for that type of approach, rather than just trying to sell you a bit of software and charge you 5 years licensing on it. It's a bit dull, isn't it, really? Yes, you need it, but there's more interesting things. I think the other thing I'd quickly say on this as well is that, and again, the difference we found in terms of rolling out the Dynamics platform is that it's enabled us to have a system that is bespoke to what we actually want. So, in many cases, when you use software of any description at home or at work, you have to compromise, you have to work how the software restricts you. Whereas actually, this is the first time we've been able to design a piece of software and also at the same time redesign our service offer to sort of actually align with that. And that's been really refreshing, but it sounds dead obvious, doesn't it? But actually, we've become accustomed to not doing that and to compromising.
How does a supplier who is looking at this, who's probably working for an organization that wants to help you achieve your objectives? I mean,
yeah, I think my sort of key thing is always, digital and technology is an enabler. It's not the solution in itself, and really does hurt me to say that because I love tech and I love the digital stuff. But I think it's about also recognizing that, yeah, a solution, you're not looking for something over 5 years that you have to, channel cables through walls and whatever. A recognition that a lot of this kit is disposable or it's time limited, and it might only have a 2-year lifespan. So it needs to be priced in a 2-year lifespan type thing, rather than trying to make out that it's going to change the way that you run your business and last forever. It isn't. We know that, and also the world changes now so quickly that some of the solutions that even we think now are cutting edge, probably in 2 to 3 years' time will be pretty much surplus to what we need. So I think just that, probably having more of a mentality around semi-disposable and ubiquitous in terms of, and also having stuff like open APIs and ability for stuff to connect without having to pay loads of money for it. And those days are gone. I just don't get why people are still trying to charge money just to get bits of kit to speak to other bits of kit. It's like, well, then that's not how it works anymore. And so I suppose and also I think it's about how we tap into other people's data. So that could be around, weather, that could be around, data that the local authority's got, data that the police have got that's non-confidential, all that sort of stuff that just helps us manage our services in a more creative way. And I think just somebody probably to come along and sometimes just help us join some of those dots, because we can sometimes see it from within the housing bubble. But that dreadful phrase that you don't know what you don't know. But if somebody else from outside the housing bubble is actually saying, I can see what you're trying to do, I understand what you're trying to do, but you do realise that data is already available over here. Actually, all you need to do is to pull that data down into your system, and that will then help you solve that problem. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but I think there's that whole thing around, you're right, I think some of this hasn't been invented yet, just as many jobs haven't been created yet, haven't they, for many people who are going through the education system at the moment. But I think I can't believe we're going to be managing homes in the same way in 10, 20 years. I just can't begin to believe that. And I think one of the risks that's coming out of lockdown is that I think that we know that, the government's got to repay all the monies that it's borrowed. And I think our sector will probably be asked a few searching questions around value for money and are we using our resources to the maximum are we optimizing those resources? And I think if you can shift the service from being reactive to preemptive, if you just take if I go back to my boiler example, it's 5 times more expensive to do exactly the same repair out of hours than it is as a planned piece of work. Yeah. So if you look at that level of efficiency, why wouldn't you invest in sorting stuff out before it goes wrong rather than waiting for things to happen? And again, the thing about the tenancies, our average void costs £2,100. That's about sector average, I think. So if, we have what, 600, is it 600, 700 relets a year. If I could avoid 10% of those, that's still a healthy slab of money that we're not going to be spending, that we could use for something else.
Is there one significant thing the government could do to help the sector and the housing crisis?
Yeah, I think the government has been really good, I think, in terms of trying to put the economy on life support during lockdown. I think, it is a gamble, but you know what? It's probably the best gamble we could have done. And who knows, we'll only find out in a year, I guess, or so, whether that's paid off. And we won't know what it would have been like if it hadn't have been done anyway. I think also, the government have made funds available, as have previous governments, for a supply of new homes. I think for me, the one thing the government needs to get sighted on is that we know we are already in a recession. We know this is the second quarter of negative growth. And we know that when furlough unwinds fully in October, that there'll unfortunately be a second wave of unemployment. And some of the projections are quite stark when they're talking about 10 to 12% of the population, working population, being unemployed. That's frightening. And I think for me, it's not just about supply of new homes. And don't get me wrong, the new homes are important. We have got plans to build 8,000 new homes over the next 10 years. So, we've got big growth aspirations. But I think my concern is that we also need a number of measures to help people who, through no fault of their own, their economic circumstances change quite radically, to remain in their home. And so, in the last recession, we had mortgage rescue scheme, which transferred people's home ownership to a rented product. There were some flaws in terms of how the system worked, but ultimately that did keep people in their homes. And also things like the housing market package, which bought properties, empty properties, off the either the existing housing market or from developers, but that kept the housing market moving. I think my ask of government would be that recognising what's likely to happen in terms of the economic impact on people, whether there are some of those solutions which are about maintaining and supporting people to remain in their own home, rather than them being put through probably one of the most stressful events of your life, which is losing your home. I've been very lucky. I've never been in this position, but can you imagine being evicted from your family home, either because you couldn't pay your mortgage or your rent? It just must be off the scale in terms of the impact that has on your mental as well as your physical health. And so for me, I think that'd be the one thing I'd ask for from government, and have been asking for from government through our trade body and our professional body.
And of course, what you've mentioned there, of course, is that the fact that the people that are affected reside in our sector.
Yeah. And we know that our customers will bear and do bear a disproportionate brunt of any economic downturn and the negative impacts that come from that. And so for me, that's where we're duty bound to try and really sort of, I was going to say strain every sinew, but that's been an overly used phrase, hasn't it, during the last 4 months? So I think more to that we throw everything at it, basically, to enable those people to stay in their homes. And I think it has been one of the things that I've been really proud of my team at Yorkshire Housing, the real life case examples that I've heard of where our people have gone much more than the extra mile to help people who've just fallen into a dreadful position. Just, you can't help but get a bit of a lump in your throat and go, wow, that is impressive, and that is bloody good, and that's what we're about. And that's why we're a housing association and not just a private letting agency.
All the very best for the future, Nick, and thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, George, as well to you.